Hello. Some of you might sometimes encounter experiences where you feel like you can't be around your partner, or like their energy is bad, and that when you're around them, you feel a lot of pain and frustration and stress, and you might not even feel like a good person when you're around them. And that's normal, and it's not a problem. It's common, it happens, and it can be worked through. Also, you might be on the receiving end of this, where your partner might say, hey, I don't want to be around you because your energy's off. Or could you please shift your energy because at this point I don't want to be around you. And you, as the person receiving these statements, might not really understand or realize what they're talking about, what it is about your energy that might be off. You might ask yourself, do I feel negative thoughts and emotions towards them or myself? How is my energy off? What's wrong with my energy? How is it bad? And you might not find any answers. And that can be a very difficult, frustrating process. Then, of course, there's the aspect of separation, which is not easy if the solution, the temporary solution in the relationship to this situation is to have separation, to not see each other for a while, to take a break. Well, of course, during that break, we can project all sorts of things. Additionally, we can look at this situation and say, man or woman, if the energy is off and they don't want to be with me, then maybe the relationship's going to come to an end. Or if they don't want to be with me because the energy is bad, then maybe they don't like me or love me, or maybe they're blaming me for the issues in the relationship, and maybe they're not taking accountability for their part. On the other side, we could also say, if I feel this way around them, if I feel negative around them because their energy is bad and their negative energy is coming on to me, then maybe they're not the person that I should be with. Maybe I should go and find someone that is going to help me feel good and positive. Now, to understand the situation, it's probably useful to start with what the person who feels like the other person's energy bad is feeling. And what they're usually feeling is that when they're around their partner, they interpret the emotions, the words, the actions, and even the subtle energies of their partner through some type of lens of pain. So when that's happening, it's because the pain is in us, not because the pain is being transferred from the partner to us. Now, that pain can be in us because of things that the partner has said in the past. If the partner has threatened the relationship many times, if they've threatened having an affair, or if they've threatened leaving us, or if they've called us names, then those statements, they do have energy, and they can sometimes get stored, oftentimes, in the relationship bucket. And if they're in the relationship bucket, then just being around that person can bring up the pain that's in that bucket. It can bring up the pain from those past experiences when that person said those things to us. It can bring up those fears of abandonment and fears of betrayal and fears of being alone and fears of being cheated on and all other associated fears and pains that we've now associated subconsciously with this person. And then when we're around them, those pains and fears get triggered, and now we're looking at them through the lens of that fear and that pain. And so even if they're not doing anything that is negative per se, we might perceive them to be being negative or to be having bad energy or negative energy. Now, one of the keys to stepping out of this is realizing that it's that nobody can make you feel anything. And that's one. And the other one is, just because you feel it doesn't mean it's true. So let's talk about the first one. No one can make us feel anything. If you've heard of resonance, if you have two guitars in a room and you pluck one string on one guitar, the same string on the other guitar, if you zoom in on it, you'll see it's vibrating. So what that means is that people can't trigger pain in us unless we already have that pain. If we're walking down the street and a homeless person or a rich man calls us ugly, if no part of us feels that we're ugly, we won't feel ugly. We won't be hurt. We won't feel pain of that. Now, if some part of us feels insecure about the way we look and does feel ugly, then when that person says that, it's gonna strike that chord, and it's going to trigger that feeling and that fear of being ugly inside of us. And so then we'll have the pain. Now, the implications of this are huge, because it means that the people we're in relationships with are actually helping us identify and bring to the surface past pain and trauma that we've been carrying with us. And that's a favor. That's a gift. When they bring this up in us, we then get the opportunity to work through that pain and trauma, to feel it, which allows us to then understand it, which allows us to then heal it and release it, which means that for the rest of our lives, we're no longer operating with the interpretive bias that pain was creating in our systems, and we're also not operating with the pain in our lives. And so our partners, who might trigger us like crazy sometimes, they're actually helping us by doing it. They're helping us because they're helping us come to understand the pain and fear that we've been carrying inside ourselves. When we no longer have any of that, then nothing anyone does can cause us to feel fear or pain inside of ourselves. And that's a wonderful thing. And that's how our relationships are truly vehicles for our spiritual evolution and spiritual growth. Now, if that is intense, that process, and we're getting triggered left and right, then it can be useful to have a break. That said, to have a break in a constructive way, meaning if the intention of the break is to diligently and in a focused way to work through that pain and the blaming that pain on the other person, so that we can be with the other person again in proximity and enjoy it, then that's a good thing. And if you communicate that beforehand, then the break doesn't need to come as a shock or a scary thing to the person you're with. If you don't communicate that to them beforehand, then they're likely going to be very triggered by the idea of a break. They're likely going to feel abandoned, and they're likely going to feel blamed for the relationship situation, and they're likely going to feel quote-unquote bad for supposedly having negative energy, and they might even get mad at you for telling them that they have negative energy and that your energy is bringing them down. And that their energy is bringing you down. So, these situations are complex. They're not easy. Having the faith that each person, meaning that your partner, has best intentions at heart, and that if they're blaming you or saying anything like this, that they really do mean well, that they really do want the relationship to work, and that maybe some part of them is in fear, maybe some part of them feels overwhelmed, maybe they're not even able to realize that. They acknowledge that they're in fear or feel overwhelmed. And you can realize that, you can recognize that, and you can give them whatever space they need. You can honor their free will, and you can have faith in the relationship, that just because you take a break doesn't mean the relationship's going to end. Now, of course, it doesn't mean threatening them and saying, oh, well, if we're going to take a break, then I'm going to go see this guy or girl. That's not optimal, because now the other person's going to get more triggered. They're not going to be able to work through the pain and that they have recorded in their systems, or the fear that they have recorded in their systems. And we're actually adding more to the bucket, so that the next time they see us, they're going to feel even more overwhelmed. So it's important to work in a positive, constructive, facilitative direction that's going to lead to less pain and less suffering over time. And that doesn't mean getting upset with yourself if you ever get reactive or blame. Forgiving yourself is good. And understanding what star to follow can make all the difference over time. Let's see if we're missing anything. If we're the other person in the relationship, meaning someone is telling us that our energy is bringing them down, well, first we can understand that We cannot make anyone feel bad. Certainly, the way we act can trigger those feelings in someone if those feelings already exist in someone. That said, we can't make them feel bad. At the same time, if we don't get triggered by their communication and start to say, oh, well, it's wrong for them to say that, oh, the relationship might end, this is bad, what's going on is bad, maybe I've done something wrong. If we start doing that, we're not going to get to a solution. Instead, what we can do is we can say, okay, I understand that right now they're blaming me maybe a little bit for some of the pain that they feel. Or at the very least, they're saying they need a break so that they can work through the pain in them that's getting triggered. If they're conscious, maybe they said that. Now, what we can do in that situation is we can recognize that we can make changes, and making changes doesn't mean that we've been wrong or did something wrong. That said, we can make changes to trigger them less. And I'll give you a really silly example. In some households, it is not okay to burping. And it's considered very rude. And when you burp in that household, then the parents get angry. And so those children in households like that tend to not like it when people burp. And they tend to not like people who burp. And still, their partner might have been raised in an opposite household, where when someone burps, everyone laughs. And so, if that partner then finds it funny or okay or not a problem to burp in the house, it might trigger, each time that person burps, it might trigger the other person into remembering all of the times in which their parents got angry at them for burping and things like that. And it might cause them to feel abandonable, and so then they might get angry and frustrated and say, why are you burping? That's nasty, don't do that. And they might, in a way, emotionally abandon the person for burping. So in that example, what we could do is we could say, okay, look, I know that it triggers them when I burp. And so I'm going to choose not to burp around them. Now, there is a dynamic worth noting, and that is that whenever someone feels like they could get abandoned for doing something, they oftentimes want to do it over and over and over again to prove to themselves that they're not going to be abandoned. And I know that sounds dysfunctional, and it happens. If there's something that we are told we're not allowed to do, a lot of times we actually feel the need to do it, to prove that we can do it and still be okay. And that's a control strategy that comes from the root chakra. Let me see if there's anything else to share. Well, if you're in this situation, you can look back through your actions, look back through your words, look back through your tone, look back through your energy, and ask yourself, did I operate in any way? Maybe it was a little bit controlling, maybe it was a little bit too assertive, maybe it was a little bit quick, or did I do anything at all that could have triggered them? That doesn't mean I did something wrong. It just means, did I do anything that could have triggered them? Now remember, people can get triggered by the silliest thing. So it really doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just might mean you did something really simple or silly, or not even silly, just basic, and it triggers that person. People can get triggered by anything. And you can look for what it is that you did that triggered them. And you can identify that. And you can do it less. You can even acknowledge it to them if you're sure that this is what triggered them, and tell them you're not going to do it anymore because you understand that it bothers them and you care about them. The other thing you can do, and this is always a valuable thing to do for anyone in the relationship, is that if you can identify whatever pain that they're holding on to, our partner, and for example, maybe you did send some text messages recently that were really angry, or maybe you called them some names, or maybe you made some threats in the relationship, like threatening to leave. Your partner might act like, oh, that's no big deal, it doesn't bother me. That said, that's really usually not true. And so if you can identify any things that you've said that they might be carrying, any pain, any fear that they might be carrying, that you may have triggered in your system when you were triggered, and you said things when you were triggered. If you can identify that, you can actually make statements that can help essentially diffuse the influence of those statements on their system. So you can say, and just acknowledging it is so useful. Repeating it, what you said. I know that I said that, I'm going to cheat on you. Or I know I said that I'm going to leave you and that you're not worth anything to me. If you really use the same words, it's really helpful because it shows that you're courageously acknowledging what you said and not trying to avoid it. And when you do that to the other person, it means that, oh, wow, this person is acknowledging what they said. It means that they're taking accountability, which means that they're working on it, which means that it might not happen again, which means that I might not be abandoned in this relationship, which is useful. It helps give people breathing room, which is really what they're looking for when they say, oh, I need some space, or, oh, I don't want to be around your energy because it's negative. They're looking for breathing room. And these apologies, these proactive apologies that acknowledge exactly what you said that triggered them and that they're carrying in their bucket, they make a huge difference. You have no idea how many relationships can be resolved just via these apologies. And they require being vulnerable. And oftentimes, we're afraid of vulnerability. We're afraid that if we're vulnerable and if we make these apologies and if we say these things, then somehow they'll have proof that we were wrong or bad. Well, I'm not saying that you did anything wrong. I'm not saying that taking accountability for the things you said and saying I'm sorry means that you were wrong. All you're saying is that, hey, I got reactive. I started to react to my fear and my imaginations and projections that all these bad things were happening. And so in an attempt to avoid those bad things and not have them happen, I said all these other terrible things. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're wrong. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be abandoned in the relationship. It means that you're, in a way, taking ownership, taking accountability for the things that you said, showing them that you understand why they would feel pain around that, and honoring the pain that they feel, saying you're sorry for the pain that they feel, understanding that you played a role in triggering that pain in them, and that that's difficult for them to manage. If you say that, it can make such a difference in the relationship. And if both partners can do that, and when one does it, typically it gets the ball rolling. And over time, the other partner might start doing it more and more, which is great because we can model these behaviors for each other. I hope this is helpful. I know it was a bit of a messy explanation, and it is a complex situation. We're trying to answer and give help towards both sides of this situation, to help both partners. And I hope that it's made sense to you and that you found it helpful. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will answer them in future videos if I feel that they're going to help a lot of people. Please understand the benefit of one-on-one facilitation in real time. Working with someone on this in real time is very, very valuable because it allows you to work through all the different parts of yourself that feel differently about apologizing and dealing with these situations, and it helps you become aware of subconscious parts which are really fueling the conflict. You can visit our website at dexteranalessandrina.com. We also have a website with a bunch of meditations, theepicself.com. That's all in the description. Thank you very much, and we wish you the very, very best in your relationship and in your life.